The chupacabra may have just been spotted in Texas. A man witnessed a creature looking like the legendary chupacabra skulking through West Houston. The sighting of the animal was caught on camera, and it seems to show a skinny, dog-like monster hurrying through a residential neighborhood as quickly as its freaky little legs could carry it. Some people have denounced the possibility of the animal being a monster, claiming that it was probably just a mangy dog or a sick coyote. But if you look closely enough, it definitely looks like a mythical blood-sucking creature. Of course, skeptics immediately call something like this fake, but those who believe will tell you that it's evidence of the mythical beast that has been noted to suck the blood out of goats and other farm animals in the depth of night. Of course, the mythical chupacabra has been a legend primarily in places like Mexico and Puerto Rico, so it's definitely rare to see it in Texas. Perhaps it crossed the border while no one was watching. This is one of those animals that biologists are adamant doesn't exist. And while they may be right, sightings like this really do make you question. The chupacabra is undoubtedly real, it just might be a mangy coyote instead of a wild vampire. A family of farmers living in Russia accidentally stumbled upon a lair of wolves back in 2017. The wolves in the lair were all pups, and the farmers were planning to put the wild animals down. Before they could, a man named Ivan purchased one of the wolf cubs and decided to raise it as his own. Today, Ivan still lives with the wolf, whom he named Sergei. They live in Volgograd, along with Ivan's daughter, who happens to be a dog trainer and helps care for the rambunctious wolf. While most people might be too scared to have a wolf in their home, these guys absolutely love it, though it definitely is a lot of work. And not even 3 years old, Sergei weighed 100 pounds and demanded a seriously active lifestyle. The wolf needs to walk every day, regardless of weather, and actually behaves almost like an ordinary dog. The biggest differences are that Sergei eats a lot of meat and chicken every day and can't stomach dog food, and he doesn't exactly play well with others. However, for such a scary animal, Ivan apparently trained Sergei to open windows and even turn on light switches. Could you imagine trying to break into a house only to find a massive wolf there guarding the property? They don't mess around in Russia, and I would never in my wildest dreams try to rob any house in a place like that.
Getting killed by an animal usually isn't dumb because some animals are totally unpredictable and quite powerful and can sometimes get aggressive. Some creatures are ambush predators that lie in wait for you to come by and strike. So yeah, getting killed by an animal isn't a bad way to go, unless you're the one that provoked the attack. This was the case in Texas in 2015. Near the border of Louisiana, a man named Tommy Woodward decided it was a good idea to mock the local alligators of a swamp and then jump into the swamp. Maybe he thought it was a brave thing to do. Most would agree it's just straight up stupid. He removed his shirt, removed his billfold, someone shouted a warning, and he said, "Blank the alligators," and jumped into the water and almost immediately cried out for help. Orange County Justice of the Peace Rodney Price said, Woodward yelled the F word before jumping in, and apparently the gators did not appreciate swearing. If his actions weren't dumb enough already, there were also multiple warning posts in the area, including a sign that literally said, "No swimming, alligators," which should have been a big clue not to dive in, but he did, and he died as a result. Number 10. The Beard of Hans Steininger. If you've never heard the name Hans Steininger, that's alright. He lived hundreds of years ago in the 16th century in Austria. He was basically the mayor of a town known as Brunau am Inn. Steininger was well known and well liked by the people of the town he governed over, but what everyone would immediately notice about him is that he had an incredibly long beard that allegedly measured about 4.5 feet or 1.2 meters long. Truly impressive. I'm a bit jealous. It's said that the beard was so long that Hans would have to tuck it into his pocket as he walked around. One day in 1567, a raging fire broke out in his town and people were rightfully in a bit of shock and panic. And this is where his dumb death came into play. As he was trying to leave his home in a hurry, his beard came loose. He tripped over it as he went down a staircase, fell, broke his neck, and unfortunately died as a result. Despite his death, he was honored by his townspeople. They put a plaque on a wall for him and even cut off his beard and preserved it in a museum for countless years. It's still there to this day if you ever want to check out a truly magnificent beard.
Lake Champlain is a huge body of water in both New York, Vermont, and Quebec. The lake is a nice spot for boating and fishing, and it also happens to hold America's own version of the Loch Ness Monster. Legends of a monster living in Lake Champlain go back to the native Iroquois of the region. When French explorers arrived in the 18th century, they were warned against disturbing the waters of the lake as there was a giant serpent living inside. Then, in the later part of the 1800s, sightings of the monster began to seriously heat up. There was even a New York Times article about a railroad crew that had witnessed the serpent firsthand in Lake Champlain, saying that it had bright and silver scales that glistened in the sunlight. By 1992, at least 600 people had claimed to witness the Lake Champlain monster. There were even photos taken throughout the 90s, and that was when the comparison to the Loch Ness monster started. Many of the photos were too blurry or out of focus to properly show if there really was a monster, but despite the controversy, there's no doubt that something large and frightening definitely lives in Lake Champlain, whether it's a small family of marine reptiles or the Loch Ness monster's cousin. The Madagascar hissing cockroach is one of the most disgusting and creepy pets that a person can have. To be quite honest, most people would never consider keeping a cockroach as a pet, but the Madagascar hissing cockroach takes it to an even higher level of disgusting. These cockroaches are enormous. They originate from the island of Madagascar and are one of the biggest species of cockroach in the world. The only good thing about them is that they don't have wings. They can't fly around freaking people out. However, they are excellent climbers. If you have Madagascar hissing cockroaches in your house, they could be climbing all over your walls and windows. It's pretty nasty. Perhaps the scariest part about the Madagascar hissing cockroach is the hissing part. They have special tubes that they use for breathing, which also allow them to make a loud hissing noise whenever they feel disturbed. Even more creepy is that large colonies of these cockroaches have been known to hiss like some kind of gross insect choir for a reason that researchers don't even know. And believe it or not, these are in fact popular pets with those who have an affinity for insects. Mermaids are supposed to be the stuff of legends. Nonetheless, there have been mermaid sightings documented ever since man could document anything. Mermaids have been sighted by people in the military, by tourists visiting the beach, and even by scuba divers. In fact, there have been so many convincing sightings of mermaids that they could very well be creatures of legend that actually exist. One of the most fascinating mermaid sightings came during World War II, when a group of Japanese soldiers spotted strange creatures during the 1940s while stationed in Indonesia. The soldiers all witnessed humanoid creatures with pink skin, fishy mouths, and the arms and legs of a frog. These weren't your typical mermaids, but they were definitely weird sea people that were apparently making gurgling and burping noises and then vanished into the water after being spotted. The local villagers already knew about these sea creatures and called them orang-ikan, which translates to English as manfish. If local villagers knew about these creatures, it's likely that they were actually a legitimate species or natural phenomenon, but scientists didn't believe them. Now, these sightings obviously haven't been verified, but it really makes you wonder if an ancient race of sea people really had been living around the Indonesian islands, but have since gone extinct just like the dodo bird. Have you ever seen a mermaid? Or something similarly mythical that you weren't able to classify? What do you think it was? Tell me about it in the comment section below. Then, before you forget, hit the subscribe button now to stay on top of all the latest videos right here on Epic Wildlife.
There's a saying that goes, it won't kill you to be nice. But that doesn't mean you can't be killed because of the niceness you exude. If you don't believe it, we can prove it to you. Tycho Brahe was a famous Danish astronomer of the 16th century. He was of noble birth and he was so popular with the king of his homeland that he was given an entire island to do with what he willed. In this case, he took the scientific route and had 2 observatories put in. He used these to great effect and has been credited with finding over 1,000 stars before telescopes were even around. But what killed him was his upbringing. Specifically, as a nobleman, he was taught to be extremely polite and adhere to the rules of decorum, especially as a guest. So when he was in Prague, after being exiled there during a banquet, he had to go to the bathroom. However, he felt it was impolite to do his business, so he held it in until the very end. At first, this may have seemed like a nice gesture, but it came at a cost. Holding it in caused serious infections within his body, and he died 11 days later, all because he was afraid he would offend someone by using the bathroom.
It seems like Like having a bear for a pet would be a pretty bad idea, and yet there is a man named Mark Dumas who basically has a polar bear pet. Mark and his wife, Dawn, work at Beyond Just Bears in Canada, where they keep an 800-pound polar bear as a pet. Of course, the bear is still a wild animal, but he's also part of their family. The polar bear's name is Aggie, and he's quite famous. He's starred in all kinds of high-budget movies, and he's spent his entire life living with Mark. The pair have developed a very strong relationship that allows Mark to swim with the polar bear, to give him bear hugs, and to treat him like an oversized dog. In all their years together, Aggie has never bitten anyone or been overly aggressive. Bears are obviously quite dangerous in the wild, but when you raise one from a baby, it's a whole different story. According to Mark, most polar bears only live for between 15 and 20 years in the wild, but Aggie is already 23 years old. She's basically a grandmother at this point. He's hoping that she'll live at least another 10 years, giving them more time to spend together as a family. Have you ever encountered a polar bear in the wild? I would hope not. They can be extremely aggressive and dangerous. If you have, leave a comment below with your experience. Then, remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't already for more wild videos just like this one. The devil bird of Sri Lanka is shrouded in legend and mystery. Its cry is said to be an omen of death, with those who hear its shriek at night almost certain to lose a loved one the next day. The original story from Sri Lankan legend says that a mother lost her daughter in a tragic accident and was driven to such despair that she ran into the forest shrieking and turned into the devil bird, known by locals as the ulama. Ever since, she has been screeching at night, acting as a harbinger of death. But the interesting thing is that the devil bird may actually exist. In 2001, a new type of bird was found that locals immediately recognized as the devil bird from legend. It turned out to be a spot-bellied owl, an extremely mysterious owl with a shrill call. This owl is almost never seen by people. Biologists don't really know much about it, and to this day, many locals in Sri Lanka still believe it to be the true devil bird, warning people of imminent doom with its ghostly night calls. There is a man named Abu Zarin Hussein, and he loves his pet snakes. Particularly, he adores his 14-foot king cobras, which by the way are the deadliest snakes in the entire world. The snake charmer plays football with his cobras and even reads them a bedtime story before going to sleep. And this is all despite the fact that he has been bitten several times by the cobras, with one especially nasty bite leaving him in a coma. Abu is in his 30s and lives in Malaysia, and he apparently became a specialist snake handler to follow in his father's footsteps. If you're wondering what exactly this guy does with his cobras, he brings them with him to training courses to teach firemen how to properly tame and handle snakes. He also operates briefings to the public on the dangers of snakes. But in his spare time, he just kinda hangs out with them. And even after having most of the skin on his right arm fall off after being injected with venom from the bite of one of his cobras, Abu says he'll stay with them for life.
Yellowstone National Park is one of the most prestigious and beautiful places in the world. Thousands of people go there each year to see the wildlife and the natural wonders that were made by Mother Nature herself. One of those natural wonders are geysers. These are plumes of water that are caused by geological conditions under the earth. In this case, Yellowstone is over a supervolcano, which causes a lot of things to happen above and below the surface, including geysers. The reason we're telling you this is that while geysers are very cool to look at, they can also be extremely dangerous because they're boiling hot. The water is so hot and acidic that it can literally dissolve your body if you go into it, which is exactly what happened to Colin Scott in 2016. He and his sister were going through an illegal area in order to reach a hot pot where they could swim. Colin tripped and fell into the geyser, and because the water was so hot, he was unable to use his limbs properly and get out. His sister went for help, but it was too late. When the park officials arrived, portions of Colin Scott's head, upper torso and hands were visible in the hot spring. And that's all.
The platypus is a prime example of an animal that people thought was fake but turned out to be real. The first Western person to ever describe a platypus was a zoologist named George Shaw, who received a sample of the animal's pelt from Australia in 1799. According to Ripley's Believe It or Not, at first, George thought someone was playing a joke on him. That makes sense, because the platypus is so bizarre that it looks like it has to be a hoax. After all, it has a duck bill, flippers, and yet it's hairy. It couldn't possibly be real, right? At least, that's what Dr. Shaw thought. He assumed someone took the bill of a duck, the pelt of a mole or an otter, and then sent them to England as a practical joke. He even cut the skin apart to try and locate stitches, though of course he couldn't find any. George Shaw drew the first picture of the platypus, which actually turned out to be shockingly close, even though he had never seen the animal before. Still, the English people were skeptical and didn't believe in the platypus for another 100 years after it was first discovered. Of course, people in Australia already knew about the platypus, but on the other side of the world, it wouldn't be until the late 1800s that the platypus was accepted as a real animal by the public. Some people are horrified by the idea of having a pet rat, but if you think a normal sewer rat is scary, just take a look at the capybara, which is basically a rat that weighs 140 pounds. These weird rodents may look cute to some people, but to others they are just big scary rats. The truth is that the capybara, which is a native animal of South America, is basically a miniature cow. It's the largest rodent in the world. It has a square head, and it always looks like it's plotting something. Capybaras are becoming increasingly popular with exotic pet owners, and they are pretty easy to care for, other than the fact that they are disgusting and eat their own poop. If you don't like the idea of a rodent in your house, a capybara is probably a bad idea. And as an interesting fact, according to The Verge, capybaras are known to spend so much time in the water that in the 1700s, the Pope declared them a type of fish and told everyone that they could eat capybara during Lent. But of course, these aren't fish.
There are two movies that make the idea of dying laughing popular. Mary Poppins, the father's boss died laughing, if you recall, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where cartoons could die due to too much laughter. You might think such a thing is impossible, but actually, you really can die laughing if you're not careful. So goes the tale of Chrysippus. He was a Greek philosopher from the 3rd century BC. He was said to be a co-founder of Stoicism, even making logical teachings that we use today, such as the programming principle of if, then. He was a very serious man and very dedicated to his work. One day, at the age of 73, he saw a donkey eating a fig. Apparently, he thought this was the most hilarious thing he'd ever seen. He could not stop laughing at the scene. He laughed so hard he lost consciousness, and then he just never woke up. But how can laughter kill a person? Simple. Laughing expels air from your lungs, and when you're in a laughing fit, it can cause you to stop breathing. This can lead to asphyxiation or suffocation. The moral of this story is clearly you should be mindful of just how hard you laugh at a joke. Or if you're a comedian, use your power responsibly.
The takahe is a bird that came back from the dead. This large chicken-like creature was first described as a new species in 1851 by Dr. Walter Mantell after the second specimen was captured. At the time, Dr. Mantell wrote that it would be very unlikely for any other living specimens of the takahe to be found. And he was right. According to New Zealand Geographic, 2 additional birds were found following its classification, and the bird was then declared extinct. The bird remained extinct until 1948, when someone spotted one in New Zealand. An expedition was mounted to find the bird, and a small flock of them were discovered in one of the remotest places in New Zealand, known as Fiordland. It turned out that this small, rather strange-looking bird had somehow survived extinction. With the help of conservationists, the takahe's numbers increased, and fast forward to 2019, and there are about 418 of them still living on the planet, though they are still critically vulnerable. An alligator that apparently belonged to Hitler himself died recently at a zoo in Moscow at the age of 84. This was reported by the New York Post in late 2020. The gator's name was Saturn. Saturn had been born in Mississippi back in 1936, before being gifted to the Berlin Zoo, then at some point transferred into Hitler's private collection. And let me tell you, if this evil man was the kind of guy who wanted an alligator as a pet, you might want to reconsider your interest in owning one of these hungry reptiles. Alligators are scary enough as it is, without being associated with the terrifying Nazi regime. Saturn was rescued from Germany by British soldiers after World War II, and then given over to the Russians, who kept the gator at a local zoo for over 70 years. Imagine that, just walking into a zoo in Moscow and seeing an alligator that was still technically a prisoner of war. Though, I imagine that Saturn the alligator was quite happy to be in the zoo for his adult life. Now that the alligator has died, he's being stuffed and put on display, though it's not clear just what exactly the alligator might represent for the Russian people.
This one is both a dumb death and a warning to prevent future deaths from happening. Mona Lisa Perez and her boyfriend Pedro Ruiz were trying to get famous on YouTube during their early 20s. At first, their videos were harmless, relatively small pranks as they went about their lives. But then, one day, Pedro did some research and felt he had a really good prank in mind. He'd give his girlfriend a Desert Eagle pistol, which is one of the most powerful handguns in the world. He'd hold up a phone book and she'd shoot him. The idea was that it would be super scary, but that the phone book would stop the bullet. Except it didn't. In fact, it went right through the phone book and into his stomach. Mona Lisa called the police, but he was gone by the time they arrived. What's worse, their young daughter was in the area and witnessed the whole thing. If you're curious, yes, a phone book can stop a bullet after it gets hit by something else. Mythbusters proved this, but they also proved that the more powerful the round, the less effective the phone book would be. So bringing in a Desert Eagle and firing point blank at a phone book? Very dumb. Mona Lisa spent months in jail for the incident. We're pretty sure this wasn't the fame they were looking for.
The remains of a real unicorn that lived roughly 30,000 years ago were just found in Kazakhstan. This is shocking for a few reasons. First, unicorns aren't supposed to exist. Secondly, the animal, which is known scientifically as the Elasmotherion sibiricus, was supposed to have gone extinct 350,000 years ago. But these newest fossilized remains show that the hairy unicorn was still wandering through ancient Russia 29,000 years before today. According to Andrei Shpansky from the Tomsk State University, Western Siberia was probably the last refuge for these mythical horned creatures. But I have some pretty bad news, as the real unicorns that lived on Earth didn't look quite like what you're probably imagining. Our fantasy images of unicorns aren't realistic, but it's likely that the legend of the unicorn was related to ancient people encountering this animal. This was an ancient species of rhinoceros that had exceptionally long horns. They were definitely not horses, they certainly weren't pure white, and they didn't have spiral horns made of gold and rainbows. Instead, they looked like woolly rhinos with curved tusks sticking out of their heads. But despite the differences, these beasts may have been the original inspiration for what we think of today as a mythical unicorn. Leech keepers are some of the bravest pet owners in the world. Leech keepers are people in charge of caring for leeches, basically making these slimy creatures their pets. And as a way of feeding their disgusting pets, leech keepers allow the parasites to slurp out their blood like vampires. According to Daily UK News, there is an increasing number of people who are keeping giant leeches as personal pets, and in order to feed their slimy friends, they simply let them suck out their blood. The breed of choice for pet owners is the buffalo leech, which originates in Southeast Asia and can grow to be an outstanding 2 feet in length. The only good thing about owning a giant leech is that they only need to be fed once every 3 to 6 months. Some breeds can even go a full year without eating. This means that leech keepers have minimum maintenance when it comes to caring for their pets. A quick blood-sucking session twice a year and no expensive food bills. It's definitely cheaper than a dog, but it's infinitely more terrifying.
Jean-Baptiste Lully was an Italian-born French musician and dancer in the 1600s. He was very gifted in the realm of music and not just a practitioner. He was so good that King Louis XIV made him the royal composer, a true honor. Proving his worth, the music that he made was a staple of the royal family, and he received another promotion as a result, to be the music master of the royal family. Lully lived a full life. His talents were put to good use, but it would be that same love for music that would ultimately end his life, while conducting no less. How is that possible? Well, in those days, conductors didn't use batons to signal timing and cues, but rather a heavy staff. They would beat the ground in order to keep time for the musicians, and during one performance, Lully accidentally hit his own foot with the heavy staff. Ouch! This caused severe infections that would kill him if his leg wasn't removed, but he wanted to dance again. So he refused to give up his leg, and he died 2 months later. all because he refused to give up one of his talents, and as a result, gave up on all of them.
The creature found by the Russian miners has been referred to as a monster mummy, and nobody is really sure what it is. The okapi is the strangest animal on Earth that absolutely has no business existing. In fact, if you were to show pictures of the okapi to one of your friends, they would probably call you a liar and denounce the pictures as fake. After all, the okapi has the black and white stripes of a zebra, it has the head of a giraffe, and it has the body shape of a deer. The okapi is a weird amalgamation of half a dozen African animals, and it lives primarily in dense rainforests in Central Africa. Scientists didn't even know these animals existed until 1900, according to the San Diego Zoo. Okapis are secretive, they stay as far away from humans as possible, and it's been estimated that there are only about 25,000 of them left in the wild. They are the only relatives of the giraffe, and yeah, they 100% look like they've been photoshopped. If you ever encounter an okapi in the wild, get a picture. People may think you're trying to fool them, but you'll know the truth. You found one of the most incredible real animals that looks like a hybrid species in the world. Out of all the birds you could possibly have as a pet, a vulture is probably the worst choice. Vultures are horrifying animals that typically feed on dead carcasses. They are ugly, they're known as harbingers of death, and they even have something similar to acid inside of their droppings. They stink, they don't learn tricks, and oh yeah, they also have a special acid in their guts that is similar to battery acid, allowing them to eat anything they want. They can feast on meat that has been rotting for some time and not feel a thing. They're really not normal animals at all. A group of vultures is known as a venue, and vultures circling the air are called a kettle. And while these aren't really casual pets, they are prolific all throughout the United States and are sometimes rescued by people who don't quite know what they're doing. Though, I have to ask what these people were thinking, adopting an animal like the vulture. Wouldn't you rather have a nice parrot or even some chickens? If you happen to find a baby vulture without its mother, it's best just to leave it alone, as it's a scary pet to have and will ultimately try to ruin your life. These birds are better left in the wild or handed over to an animal sanctuary.
Sam Wardle was a simple man of the 1800s. He lived in New York and his job was a lamplighter. Specifically, he would turn the street lamps on when night fell and turn them off when morning came. Seems simple enough, right? But there was a catch to his job that many of you are likely not thinking of. Mainly, he would have to wake up really early in the morning to go and turn off the lamps, so he needed an alarm clock to go and not just ring, but ensure that he would wake up without fail. So he attached his regular alarm clock to a shelf that had a 10-pound stone on it. When the alarm would go off, the shelf would collapse, the rock would drop, and the noise it made would wake Sam up. All in all, a clever idea. Honestly, I'd probably try it. But then, for a Christmas party, he moved the bed around so it was right under the shelf. He got drunk at the party and forgot to move the bed back. So when the alarm went off, the shelf collapsed, the rock dropped and landed right on his head, killing him.
A small group of miners working in a remote region of Russia recently discovered a bizarre animal that, at first, nobody believed really existed. The freaky creature was pulled out of the frozen sand in an area where the average daily temperature hovers around -45 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of the extreme cold, the mummified beast was discovered in pristine condition, with its fangs and claws still intact. Even more interesting is that the frozen sand in which the creature was discovered dates all the way back to the Mesozoic era, which means it could be between 252 and 66 million years old. After the discovery of the strange monster, it was taken back to the nearest major cities that it could be examined by scientists. Some estimate that the creature could be a previously unknown dinosaur, while others say it could be an extinct type of wolverine. Nobody really knows what the creature is, but one thing for sure, it's definitely real. It's generally agreed that dragons don't exist. However, you might be interested to know just how close a real, breathing dragon was to existing on our planet. You have to remember that ancient cultures actually believed dragons existed, specifically in China, where they often interpreted the bones of dinosaurs as belonging to dragons. It wasn't until more recently that humans looked at dragons as mythical beasts. But these animals may have been a bit more real than we give them credit for. For example, when comparing the long dragons of ancient China, the drakon from ancient Greece, and the worm from Old England, we see that different cultures on Earth all had the exact same ideas of what dragons looked like. These creatures were long, they had very small legs, or no legs at all, and they looked a lot like snakes. Now, there happens to be fossil evidence suggesting that snakes evolved from lizards, and as they were evolving, their legs were shrinking and gradually disappearing. This actually fits perfectly with the description of ancient dragons. Now, if we look back a few million years, we'll be looking at the Earth during a time when the titanoboa was the largest snake ever, with a monstrous length of 40 feet. If you make the assumption that at some point the titanoboa may have been even larger and had short little legs, it basically could have been a real-life dragon, or pretty close to it.
Have you or someone you know did something because you looked at the action in question and went, "There's nothing that could possibly go wrong here," and yet, obviously, it did? Sadly, this happens a lot in the world, and it leads to some really dumb accidents and deaths, such as with Gary Hoy. He was a lawyer at a firm in Toronto, one that was on the 24th floor of the building no less. Gary decided to go test the windows of the building in front of a group of touring students, no doubt trying to both scare them and impress them. Again, nothing could possibly go wrong, right? Well, the first attempt went fine, but after putting his full weight into it, he got the glass to pop out of the frame and he plummeted to his death. This infamous death has become a piece of pop culture and was even highlighted on 2 different TV shows because of how brutal and dumb the event was. So yeah guys, don't throw yourself at windows. Thanks for watching. Which one of these deaths did you think was the dumbest? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and we'll see you next time on the channel. Bye!